G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Cairo Marsh from Relativ. He's based in Tokyo, Japan. Thanks for your time today, Cairo.
Thank you, Troy. Happy to be here.
Start with how we know each other. So we both are listed on the matchmaker.fm website for finding guests to come on casts and vice versa.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. No, seriously, I thought your podcast, when I saw it on Matchmaker, super interesting. Very happy to be a part of it. I think doing things for the business community and sharing insights is really important. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you. And it's great because the audience loves to hear from small business owners that have started with at least around five team members and grown it. And you've certainly done that, as we'll get into in a minute. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Yeah, cool. So my business is called, as you mentioned, Troy, called Relativ. Our focus is in marketing and advertising. So we really work with mainly multinational corporations to help them understand ways to connect with their consumers. The company's called Relativ because our premise is rooted in the idea of relationships. So a lot of advertising is about transactions, promotions, creative. What we really believe is that we're trying to cultivate longer-term relationships for our brand and our clients. So we consult, we design, we analyze, and we help our clients really find solutions that build that longer-term connection.
Great. How did you start out?
Well, I've been in advertising pretty much my whole career. So I'm originally from New York, based in Tokyo now for the last 13 years. But I've worked in marketing since the very, very, very beginning. And always a little bit on the customer engagement, customer retention, relationship side. So I started out working for a very small marketing consultancy in New Jersey, right outside of New York City. And then basically parlayed that into a broader advertising agency, Madison Avenue type of agency in New York, but also doing things that were very data-driven, insights-driven, analytically driven. Eventually, that led me to Tokyo. I'm giving you the short story. Please stop if you want the long story.
Oh, good.
But that led me to Tokyo eventually. And then after being in Tokyo, working at another agency for about 6 years, I basically had an opportunity with a client, one of my clients who we were working with at my old company, was looking for a different angle, a different approach. And it really, to me, felt like a good opportunity to build something new and to really try to put into effect my philosophy. And so we launched Relativ back in 2015.
Right. And how old were you then when you decided to start your own business?
How old was I then? I don't even know how old I am now. How old was I then? I think I was 42.
42. Yeah, great. Do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of the business over the last 7 years?
Well, the business, fortunately, has done really well. And I think that's based on the team that we have, it's based on the clients that we have, and it's based on the relationships that we have. So we started this business with one client back then. And that one client is still, fortunately, our client today, 7.5 years later. And we've gone from 5 people when we started that business to a total of 31 people now. The business and revenue size, if you do that math, it's almost equivalent. We're about 800% larger in total revenue now than we were our first year in business.
Fantastic. That's wonderful growth. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I'll let you know when I get there. I don't know if that moment has occurred yet, but I think for us, the success is in the work, to be honest. Being able to do good work on our terms is the moment that I think we felt successful. And I think that's part of the motivation. I think a lot of us start our own businesses because we have an idea of what type of work we should be doing. We want to do it the right way versus, another way, and we want to do it profitably. And so the success has been able to do that basically every day for the last 7 years. And so every day I feel a little bit successful. I don't think we've gotten to the point where I'm like, yes, we've made it. But I don't think we'll ever get to that point because we want to continue to grow and our ambitions will continue to drive us.
And would that be your answer for the next question, which is what does success look like to you?
Well, if I answered what does success look like to me, I think success, in part, success looks like doing the right work the right way, yes, but it also is about influencing others to do things the right way. As an advertising agency, what we do is we sell strategies, we sell marketing, we sell concepts to our clients. Success is when we can bring that to life because our job in principle is to straddle what does the business need? How does the business grow? What do consumers need? How do we get them the right product or service? And when we do that right, when we're able to get those ideas out in an influential way, that's really probably the ultimate definition of success.
Perfect question for you. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
Number one thing I recommend to marketing a fast-growing business, authenticity. I think first you have to know what you stand on versus what your consumers stand on. I think a lot of times people go, what do my consumers want? That's nice and it's important, but what are you about and what's your unique, not even unique selling proposition, unique values-based proposition? What do you stand on? Why do you serve a particular consumer? Define that, then figure out which consumers will engage with that. But you have to have that clear point of view. It's almost like, we all know people in our personal lives who have very malleable or flexible personalities and people who are very themselves. People who are very themselves tend to stand out.
I think you've just described most of my ex-girlfriends. How did you fund the business?
Originally, we just bootstrapped it all. Like, it's basically money that I had saved up that we put into the company to get things going. Then as time went on, we got some loans and financing from a couple of Japanese institutions. As we grew, there sort of becomes a need to make sure you have enough cash in the bank so that you can expand or fund new hires. So we then also borrowed money from institutions in Japan.
What about any investors? Did you take on along the way?
No. So right now, I am the sole owner of the company, and as it was when we started. Over time, maybe that'll change if we decide to expand more aggressively. But I think we've been able to move at a decent pace under the current model.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people will look at advertising and they'll say, well, it's not the sexiest industry that it used to be. A lot of talent, a lot of people have gravitated more towards tech, towards development, and a lot of the creative energy that advertising historically has been a little bit more competitive to get. The reason why I personally think it's still exciting now and even more exciting is that means the industry is changing, and change always begets opportunity. There's so much dynamicism as we try to figure out what the next stage of advertising will be, that I think that this is a great place to be. It's a great place to challenge the service model. So I would definitely do it. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Oh, there's been so many stressful points. How do you define most? How do you define most?
That's hard. Hard to pick one.
I think the hardest part, I think in the beginning, there's two parts that challenge, I think, any business owner. One is staying true to what you believe. There's always an opportunity because of either pressure or revenue or whatever factors there may be that encourage you to get off your own path. To say, well, look, I don't really want to do this, but I will because we need the money, we need this. And we've had a couple of opportunities which seem pretty enticing. And as a small business, depending on other businesses, there was a lot of pressure sort of brought to bear that says, well, maybe we should change our course. And not doing so could also upset some of our clients. And so we had to make a couple of what I like to believe are courageous decisions to say, okay, well, what are we really about? And even if we decide not to go along this opportunity path because it's not for us, even if that were to cost us everything, is that the right thing to do? And so sticking true to that mission and why we started the company was really important. The other key point is cash. Cash is always a problem.
Yeah.
Cash is, you know, as they say, cash is king, and making sure that you always have money in the bank account. I think there was one particular time, and sorry, just to provide a little background, within an advertising or marketing context, my background is in client development. My background is in strategy. My background is in customer consulting. I'm not a finance guy per se. That's the least of my strengths. It's the last tool I have in my toolkit, I guess. But one of the things when you're starting your own business is, how do you make sure that you have enough cash? How do you operate that? Because that's core. And that was a big learning curve for me. And I had to challenge myself to do certain things differently. We had one situation where basically we were out of cash, and payday was coming up on a Friday, and literally the bank account could not have supported payday. We had one client who was they owed us about 4 months late, 3 months late on a payment. And I'm like, if I can get that payment, well, I'll be okay. And so literally it's me calling up this client every day in a way that's unlike me, because I'm the consultant. I'm here to help you, to really pester them like, I need this money. And the client literally told me at one point, like, yeah, I can pay you in 2 weeks. And I'm like, that's fantastic, except payroll's next week. What am I going to do about that? And so don't worry about it. It's a big corporation. And I'm like, look, I'll just come and sit in your lobby every day until I can talk to your CFO. I'm just in the lobby. I just need this money. I don't have a choice. And basically harassed them enough, and we were able to get that money across. But that was literally where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to explain to my team that we don't have the cash in the bank, but it worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. Cash is certainly a big stress point for most businesses, particularly those ones growing. Mm. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
What area of the business do we have to work on the most to add the greatest value? I would say, look, the most important thing in our company is people. Like, everything's talent. So marketing, advertising, consulting is a function of getting the right ideas in front of the right people in a compelling way. So getting people in, hiring people, figuring out how to retain them and motivate them, figuring out how to make sure that they have a mission that they feel is fulfilling, is probably the most critical piece of our business. And it's also the most challenging, because even when you get it right, personnel changes sometimes, clients and the opportunities you can offer them changes. So how do you maintain that team and that continuity? That's critical, because without that, we're just a logo.
Yeah, as I like to say, people are the hardest thing in small business, and where the value's at, you can't do it on your own.
Yep, absolutely.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
Oh, what have I enjoyed this? I think I've enjoyed it all, to be honest. Like, even the parts I haven't enjoyed, I've really enjoyed that. And the reason why I really enjoyed the parts that I haven't enjoyed is because it's a challenge, and it's growth. And I think that's a big part of why I've decided to do this. I think, to answer your question very directly, I think that the frustration between your ambition and the reality, that's the part I've enjoyed the least. Yeah. I think in a certain way, you envision, you come up with this idea. Here's how I'm going to build the company. Here's what it's going to do. It takes longer than you think. It's harder than you think. Things, you go backwards when you think you should be going forwards. And all these things that say, well, why isn't it adding up? I'm putting all my blood, sweat, and tears into it, but why isn't it adding up? And that frustration is the part that I've enjoyed the least. But I also, as I said, provides me with the greatest learning and growth opportunity. And I think part of this is for me personal growth, because this is not the easiest way one can make $1. I think there's easier ways one can make $1, but I think I am constantly in an opportunity where I can grow and I can learn and I can improve myself. So I enjoy it nonetheless.
I think it's in our DNA as business owners. We are just perpetually impatient. We always want that vision to become a reality now.
Yep.
Have you heard of the rule of 4x2?
No, tell me about it.
So I heard a VC in London say this because he gets hit up for money all the time by business owners, entrepreneurs. He says it's going to take you 4 times as long and cost twice as much, or take twice as long and cost 4 times as much. The only difference is you get to choose which.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Uh, Again, the people probably. Like I think that as we've grown, it's about giving people opportunities. It's about watching other people step up and grow. I think when we also do that in a way in our business that delivers value to our clients, where because I think that really, as I mentioned before, the joy in our business, the success in our business is bringing a great idea to life. When you can empower your people where they feel like they're bringing their ideas to life in front of their clients, I think that's really, I was gonna say, it sounds cliche. It's really a beautiful thing to see, but it really is, because I think it's really about creativity, ideas, and energy, and allowing people to express themselves, and that is amazing for me.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Pride. So I'm a very proud person in a certain way, and I think pride only gets you so far in a small business. There's a point where you have to sort of shut that down and go like, look, it's gonna be whatever it takes, whatever is required. Certain things, I was working for a global advertising agency before I started Relative, and part of what you do, you're going backwards. It's a smaller company. You're doing things that maybe you haven't done actively in 10 years. And you're like, oh, I'm past that stage of my career. No, you're not. You're right back there. And I think that giving up that sense of pride, how am I going to contribute and get work done? There was a bit of work that I was doing for a while where I was basically, what's the right way to say it? Consulting directly for a client, where I'm in that client's office every day, working essentially as the most junior member of their team, just helping out. What do you guys need? You need a little help with analytics. You need this. And that's how we were creating an entry for this client. So in order to create opportunities, in order to grow the company, I think you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes. And so giving up pride is really important.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Uh, I think, I don't know the proper word for it, but it's that stick-to-itiveness, for lack of a better way. Yeah, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So maybe you call it grit, maybe you call it whatever words we choose to use. But I think it's about overcoming hurdles. One of my in my career journey, I started out working for a really small marketing consultancy in New Jersey, as I said, and I was the admin assistant for the founder of that company. And as the admin assistant for this guy, basically you get to see everything. I'm doing the filing, but I can pick his brain every day. What's going on? Why'd you do that? What's going on? And he was super open. And the thing that he told me that I never forget, that I tell people all the time, the first rule of business, in his words, are to stay in business.
Like it.
Yeah, whatever it takes. Once you're out of the game, you're out of the game. The rule is stay in the game. And I think that whatever it's going to take to get you there is critical, and just do what's required.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. GrowSmallBusiness.com.
Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? I mean, that's terrific growth, Cairo, 5 to 31 team members in 7 years. I'm sure you've got some advice here for the audience on people.
Yeah, I think for us, and I think for a lot of companies, people is your most critical asset. So being prudent about that's really important. And I think today, in most markets, certainly in Japan, certainly in the US, I presume also in Australia, hiring's getting tougher.
Yeah.
Where people are they have more options. A lot of people want to do different things, et cetera. So I think building your team means first finding people who believe what you believe. And you have to have a values-driven approach a little bit so you can create sustainability around who you hire. The other piece that I think is really important is making sure that you're hiring for the right reasons. Sometimes I've made mistakes where, oh, we got this new opportunity, we got to get this work done, and you hire out of panic, you hire out of fear, you need a body. We got to get
warm body syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, we got to get somebody in now. That's almost never worked out. That's almost never worked out because hiring for the wrong reasons. When you hire people because you believe in them, because they believe in you, whether or not there's a perfect slot or job description you're sliding into, I think you build longer term success. To quote another ex boss of mine, when I was working at this global agency in New York, and I was going through this weird period where I was having some issues with my family, was going through some health issues, and I was a little bit stressed out and burnt out, and I was trying to quit. And my boss told me, "Dad, don't quit. Take a sabbatical, come back." I'm like, "Don't worry about me. Let me just do my thing. You worry about the company." And he told me, he's like, I am worried about the company. He's like, because when you have the right people, you'll make money in the long term. And so getting that right people together is really something that I try to keep in mind. And I worry about the right people more than I worry about money in the short term when it comes to hiring.
That's great advice. What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Culture's tough.
Yeah.
Culture is tough because culture is also challenged by different perspectives. People come in and out. Also and we were talking about this internally on my side, is that in the post and pandemic era, where people are less looking each other in the face every day, and you don't have those physical connections, culture is also increasingly challenged because you have less opportunities to build and share that because you're not in person the same way. I think, though, culture starts with values, again, and what you believe in, and living that. I think as a business owner or business leader, you have to live that culture so that people actually see it and exemplify it. Then you also, as we talked about 2 seconds ago, have to hire for that culture so that you're bringing people in against those actual values. And then you have to manage against that culture, manage both your people and manage against your clients in that way. And sometimes it's challenging. I get challenged on this all the time, where people on my team who maybe are newer to the team or don't, have the same history with the team or point of view that I have, will say, well, why don't we just do it that way? That's what the client wants. That's what it'll be easier. And I have to really bring it back. Like, that's not who we are, right? And standing on that can be hard, and it can be uncomfortable. And it's a challenge as we sort that out internally. But as we align on that and how we work on a daily basis, I think that's what creates the culture, again, and that's reflective of the work we deliver, how we treat our people, how we treat each other and communicate. It's really living it, I guess. Culture is a living thing. It's not a happy hour pizza on Fridays kind of thing. It's how you live the work.
Yeah, totally agree. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
I haven't. It's a very, very, very simple answer. Look, I think balance is important, and I appreciate it for those who need that. I'm not suggesting I don't. I'm suggesting that it hasn't been my focus. And the reason it hasn't been my focus is that I feel that I'm fortunate enough every day that I do what I love. So my life is really balanced in the sense that every day I do what I love. And I do it as long as I have the energy to on that particular day with no distractions. So I'm not overly concerned about calibrating between, okay, this and, personal life. Maybe I should be. I'm sure some people in my life might appreciate it if I did. But I'm super motivated by what I do. And it's not a matter, I don't feel conflicted about, oh, I need this time or that time. I feel very true to myself when we're building this company, when we're serving our clients, when we're serving our people.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Probably not enough. To be fair, I think, sometimes, as they say, doctors make the worst patients.
Yeah.
And I think so you end up focusing on others, on your team or on your clients and things like that. That being said, I do think it's important. I do think it's critical, part of a business networking organization here in Japan that helps provide that sort of support on a monthly basis, where we do monthly sort of meetings and talk about our different issues, both as it applies to the business and also the things that surround the business, which has been really, really helpful and supportive for me. I've also taken different seminars or classes to make sure, from a skill perspective, as the industry evolves, that I know what's going on, because I think that obviously you can be lost in the administration of a business versus in the content and in the delivery of that business. So I do try to make sure I take time out each year to do that. But I think there's definitely more that I can do to continue to focus and improve myself, because the better I am, I think right now, the better the company would be.
Have you had mentors or coaches along the way?
I've had a lot of mentors in my career, who I still look up to, who I still heed their advice. I told you about two different people who today their words still reside with me. And we're talking about advice. In one case, I got 20 some odd years ago. In another case, 15 years ago. These are people who have really influenced me. And I've got probably about 5 people throughout my career who I would say are people who I look up to, who I refer back to whenever I get to challenging or interesting situations, who sort of become my sort of touchstones of the type of work that I should do. And they're sort of my true north on how I work and what I do.
Do you have a board of directors or advisors?
Currently, I do not.
Yeah.
Currently, I do not. That's something I considered into doing a board of advisors, but it hasn't been something that we've needed to focus on in the immediate term, so we have not done that yet.
All right, Cairo, one of our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
The hardest thing in growing a small business, I think, is knowing whether or not you're making the right decisions. I think that every decision sometimes feels really big. It feels like, well, if I go too far to the left, I would go too far to the right, will we be off road? And you don't know 100%, right? You have your experience, but there's a lot of risk and unknowns that approach things. You don't get to always have true clarity on that, which means that you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust that any mistakes you make, which you will be survivable. That these are you are going to make mistakes, but you're going to be intelligent enough and rational enough that the mistakes that you make will be survivable mistakes along the way. But the hardest part is not knowing. And there's always, we talked about this a little earlier. How do I get to my vision a little bit quicker? How do I move this along? And you're always trying to make the right decision. And I think that's really hard, and it's really impossible to know. Ultimately, I think that we all have to trust ourselves, 1, 2, be patient with ourselves and offer ourselves a degree of grace, both for our mistakes and for, as you said, the unexpected time things may take, and allow ourselves the room to be on that journey versus to be focused on that destination. But it's hard.
Sure is. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Favorite business book that's helped me the most? Interesting. That's a good one. I should have studied up on that question. Like, I tell you what, like, one of the things, I don't really know if I have a great business book. There's books that I like. Like, one of my favorite books is a book called The Big Switch. I don't know if you've read about it. It's really, the whole point was about moving from a cloud-based infrastructure from a local IT-based infrastructure, and how that really is going to change the marketplace. So I'm really interested in books like that sort of look at how the industry landscape, our technological environment is shifting, those books fascinate me. But in terms of probably the way that I manage and the way that I think, my favorite book is the Tao Te Ching,
Right.
which is, the 5,000-year-old Chinese philosophy book, which is really about how to live in general, right? So the Tao Te Ching literally means the way and its power. And it's about how do you get through life and how do you live in accordance with the way, the natural rhythms of the world. And I think when I become sort of, oh, I might be overwhelmed by this, or, oh, there's so much to do, it's about sitting back and trying to feel the way, if you will. There's certain energies that I think that when we follow them and when we listen to the energy that's out there, we are able to be more productive. We're able to be more successful. And we're able to be more at peace. So oddly enough, when I feel challenged at work and I feel challenged in what do I do next, I pick up my copy of the Tao and I read that, and that helps ground me.
Have you read Crossing the Chasm?
No, I have not.
It's a tech industry book, I think early 90s. It's about the challenges of tech companies crossing the chasm, obviously, during their stages of growth. It's a really fascinating book. I think you might enjoy that.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
So I try to learn from everywhere I can. There's not one specific place that's my go-to. I think I go to everywhere that I can find. Like, I'm a big consumer of content on LinkedIn. I follow a few different thought leaders on LinkedIn that I really appreciate, some in my industry in particular, but some outside of the industry, looking really for inspiration. I try to also leave myself room, and this may sound dumb or arrogant or both, or it's hard to get those both in one thought, but I think I've managed to do it. But I've also tried to give myself space for more inspiration and less for sort of imitation, right? Like, I think part of the way that I like to work is to try to figure out, who do I believe in? Why do I believe in what they're doing? But in a way that gives me a lot of room to interpret that and how we might want to think about that against our business, so we can sort of create some different thoughts. Like, I really like one of the people I personally follow in that inspiration vein, Simon Sinek.
Yes.
And so to me, Simon Sinek is perfect because I follow him. I follow him on a few different platforms, but I like him because it's the inspiration part of how he thinks about why we should be working, how companies should be organized and serving, that I then go, great, how do I then apply that to what I do? And that's really where I find a lot of value in content.
Yeah, big fan of Simon Sinek. You've obviously watched his TED Talks, one of the top 10 downloaded TED Talks on why, and then he wrote the book Start on Why. And I saw a good clip on LinkedIn the other day. I'll shoot it through to you in a moment about a barista. I'm not sure if you've seen that. It's a great 2-minute.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll shoot that through to you.
Sounds great.
One tool you'd recommend to help growing a small business?
One tool, that social media, and that's a broad-based set of tools. I think pick your poison depending what industry you're in. But I think the ability to engage with your consumers or probable consumers directly is really key. Now, there's obviously other ways you can do that. You can do that via SEO. You can do that via CRM, sort of contact management database, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if I were to choose one, I think social media is a far more dynamic and organic place for people to actually put themselves out there, to both be visible and to be a part of the conversation with your target audiences. The key thing is, as I said before, when you asked me what's the most important marketing advice I would give, is that idea of authenticity. There's no faking it, and there's no I think fast path. I mean, there are, but I don't think that they're sustainable in the long term. So I think that putting out whatever your proposition is, whatever your beliefs are, whatever your culture is, in an authentic way on social media, and then trying to make sure that you're finding people that you want to have conversations with in that, I think, are critical.
Final, my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out 7 years ago?
what would I tell myself? Be patient, maybe. That's probably the most important things. But like, it's really interesting, right? Because and I say this: be patient, yes, but also be grateful, I guess, because I think that you know you always say that things could have been better or faster. 7 years ago, like we literally started this company with 5 people in a 3-month contract from one client that 7 years later we're still here. That's not something to be taken for granted. That's not something to be dismissed like, oh, it could have been bigger, or why didn't we go faster? Yes, of course, we all want more, but to be grateful for being here, and the success and impact that we've had, even if it's at whatever scale, on whatever set of clients, whatever business, it's something that honestly, I think that when I really stop and reflect about it, that I'm kind of humbled by, and I'm grateful for. That's probably the most important thing, and that's the thing I appreciate most about what I've done. Yeah, it's just the gratitude to be able to do it.
Yeah, I was really poor at that at the start of my business career 23 years ago, but in the last 10 or so years, I've been able to slow down and really take stock of what our teams have achieved, and rather than always just looking for the next project and moving on, and just stop and reflect. And that it's a perfect word for it, is to be grateful for where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks very much for your time today, Cairo. I think the audience will get a shit ton of value out of what you've shared with us. Really enjoyed the chat. Congratulations to you and the team over the last 7 years. That's terrific growth, 5 to 31 team members, and doing great work out there. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Troy.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.